Hello, my name is Morwenna Keasley and I am an artist working mainly with photography, and I'm also a tutor at Stills. In this video we're going to look at some of the basic elements of photography. We're going to look at colour, texture and shape. So that means if you're a complete beginner and you've never taken photos other than quick snaps on your iPhone, which is fine, or if you've got a bit more experience and you're quite interested already, or if you've got lots of experience and knowledge about photography, this video is for all of you. So this video is split into three parts. First of all, we're going to look at colour, then we're going to look at shape, and then finally we'll look at texture. So it's up to you how you want to use this video resource. You might want to watch it all through once and then go back and do the task that comes with each section, or you might want to stop the video after each section. It's up to you. Here is some of my work for you to have a look at before we start. In this video, we're going to look at some of the basic elements of photography: colour, shape and texture. Remember, the photographic frame is almost always a rectangle or a square. Part of the challenge of photography is choosing how to fit your subjects into the frame. This is often referred to as composition and includes thinking about the shapes that objects and/or people are composed of, and also the negative space they create when surrounded by a frame. First of all, we're going to think about colour. Most of us see the world in colour, so it seems natural that this is the dominant way of thinking about the world we live in, including the photographs that we make of that world. Obviously, not everyone does see in colour, so if that's you, then please remember that this video is for you too. For those of us that do see in colour, we definitely experience it in many different ways. For example, this is my partner's hat. He swears it's pink, but it's obviously red, isn't it? Do you remember this? The dress illusion. This is the same dress, but some people see it as white and gold, and others see it as blue and black. How do you see it? Colour illusions are images where the objects surrounding the colours trick the eye into incorrectly interpreting the colour. What's happening with the dress is that your eye is either discounting the blue, so all you're seeing is the white and gold, or discounting the gold tones, so your eye sees the blue and black. Let's look quickly at the history of colour in photography. When you think of old photos, we mainly think of them in black and white, don't we? But actually, colour has been around for a long time. That's because colour photography wasn't really in widespread use until the 1970s. Although the three-colour method, which is the foundation of virtually all colour processes, was actually founded in 1855 by a Scottish scientist called Sir James Clerk Maxwell, and he was actually from Edinburgh. Here's one of the first examples of a colour photograph, taken in 1861 by Thomas Sutton. As you can see, it's a tartan ribbon. One of the reasons we don't see colour as much in historical photography is because early practitioners found it incredibly hard to stop the colours fading as soon as the photograph was viewed. In the 1930s, companies such as Kodak and Agfa started to produce stable colour film, but it was really expensive and even more difficult to use. By 1970, prices were coming down, and in most families, colour had become the norm for snapshot taking. And I'm sure if you've got a kind of a family album tucked away in your house, you'll have examples of that. A photographer that we credit for elevating the colour photograph from the family snapshot to the fine art photograph is William Eggleston. He was born in Memphis, Tennessee and raised in Mississippi, where he continues to live and make his work. So these photographs might seem kind of familiar to you, or if not familiar, then recognisable. And that's the point of his work, is that he's always photographing everyday things. His subject matter is the town he lives in, the people that he meets, the things that he sees. So his way of making pictures is to just go on walks with his camera, and what he's looking for is repetition of colour. He's looking at shapes and he's looking at texture, which is all the elements that we are going to be looking at in this video. Another photographer that I want to show you whose work kind of leads on from William Eggleston is a Dutch photographer called Vivian Sasson, and she lives in Amsterdam and works kind of between fashion and the fine art worlds. In her photographs, she's known for her use of geometric shapes and abstracted bodies. And if we look here at her work, you can see really strong use of colour. And she does crop her images, or the way she takes her images, she gets very close up to her subject matter. And in doing that, she abstracts the bodies so that something as familiar as a leg or a foot or a hand can seem magical and surreal. You can see in this picture here, the guy in the chair, she's actually photographed the man on the ground and then just turned the photograph to give us, again, that gives a sense of the surreal. And if you want to make photographs like this with lots of beautiful bright colours, your best friend is going to be sunlight. Nice strong sunlight will give you these very saturated colours, but if you don't have that, you can also use artificial light, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay, I'd like you to make a series of photographs that showcase each of the subtractive primary colours. So you might want to take inspiration from William Eggleston or Vivian Sasson or any other photographer you like, or you might just want to see what comes out. So we are going to use the red, yellow and blue model of primary colours. Sometimes this is referred to as the subtractive model. I have decided to do this challenge just from inside my living room because we're still in lockdown. So I'm just going to show you around my messy living room, lots of plants. And I'm just looking for potential subjects that might be of interest, bearing in mind the primary colours. Maybe over here, these nice tulips that I bought recently, very nice. Oh, a bit messy over there. Oh, look at all, I've got lots of lovely plants. So maybe I'll photograph those, or maybe some of these little trinkets that I have. And really, I want you to pay attention to the colours. Pay attention to objects that you think might look good as a photograph. And just try and look at a familiar space in a new way. One question you might want to ask yourself is, will you use sunlight or artificial light? Now, in my case, I'm just going to use sunlight because although it's a fairly cloudy day, there's some little bursts of sunshine, and where possible, I would advise trying to use sunlight because that's how you get the most natural looking colours. The next question you might want to ask yourself is, are you going to hold your camera portrait or landscape? So I'm just using my phone. Now I'm going to try it portrait, and then I'll try it landscape. And you'll see how your composition changes completely depending on how you have the orientation of your camera. I think this is going to look better portrait, so that's what I'm going to do. The next question you'll want to ask is, will you use a close-up, a medium or a wide shot? So here's some examples here. The plant, very close-up plant, a medium shot and a far away shot, and you'll see the way that we interpret the photograph changes completely depending on which shot type you use. Another question is, will you use a shallow or a high depth of field? Now I'm going to give you some examples of both. Here we have an example of a shallow depth of field where only the petal, the tulip, is in focus, and you'll notice the background has fallen out of focus. And then we have a high depth of field where everything in the photographic plane is in focus. So all the leaves, the branches and the sky are in focus. That is a high depth of field. Now if you're using a camera phone, the best way to achieve a shallow depth of field is to move your camera close to the object that you're photographing. Okay, and that automatically should give you a shallow depth of field. If you're photographing something from a medium or a wide shot on a camera phone, you will get a high depth of field where everything is in focus. Or if you have a DSLR, you can pop it onto aperture priority mode and have a play about, and you should see you'll be able to change from a shallow to a high depth of field. But it's not something to get too worried about just now. Okay, so I am now going to show you my 3 pictures that I made fairly quickly in my living room. Actually, I cheated and went into the bedroom as well. So the first one here is my yellow picture showcasing the tulips. Here's my red picture, which is more close up and kind of looking at the graphic shapes of this vinyl on a tabletop. And then my blue picture, which is a bit moodier, that's made in the bedroom. And I like the combination of the self-portrait and the environmental portrait, and by that I mean you can see all these little objects that maybe tell you a little bit more about me and my environment. So that's it. Super easy, 3 pictures, a red one, a yellow one and a blue one. See what you come up with. Okay? So the next thing we're going to look at is shape, and to do that we're going to look at 2 photographers just like we did before. So the first one is Bela Kolarova, and she was a Czech artist, and as you can see here, she had a really interesting way of working with objects and photography. So what she would do is she would collect like loads of paper clips or loads of nails or just little objects, and then she would arrange them on a table in these lovely intricate patterns, and then she would use her camera just as a recording device. So she would just hold the camera up above her composition and take a really nice clear image. I really like her work because you can just use everyday objects to achieve this kind of image, and really what we're looking at here is shape. And what shows up the shape is the nice neutral white backdrop. So if you're going to do images like this, it might be best to work on a nice clean sheet of white or cream paper. And you're also wanting to have a very diffuse light source, so we don't want any direct sunshine for this kind of work. But yeah, you can just use the little scraps and odds and ends that you find around your house. The other photographer I wanted to show you was Gary Fabian Miller, and he is an English artist photographer, and he makes these really beautiful abstract photographs. Now, we're not going to go into exactly how he makes them because a lot of this is to do with the chemical relationship of analog papers to light. I'm showing it here as an example of work that really celebrates geometric shapes, squares, rectangles, circles, and you might be able to emulate this work by photographing onto a black background and just look around your house for different objects that contain geometric shapes, and then instead of taking your images in focus, you might decide to take them out of focus. Now, if you're using a DSLR, you just quickly take it off of, there's a little button on the lens that says AF and MF. You would slide it to MF, which stands for manual focus, and then just take your lens, twist it gently, and the image should become out of focus. If you're using a mobile phone, you could always get a piece of cling film and just wrap it around your camera phone so that it covers the lens, and that should give you a nice diffused out of focus look. Before we move on to the task, I just want to have a quick look with you at this photograph by Henri Cartier-Bresson. Cartier-Bresson was a really important figure in the history of photography, a French photographer who co-founded the famous Magnum photo agency. If you are into photojournalism, you might have heard of Magnum. And he also coined this phrase, the decisive moment, which photographers have come to understand as the perfect time to press the shutter, or in other words, this ability that photography has to capture a fraction of a second, because we rely on a mechanical device, a camera, to make the image with us. And I'm just going to tell you I'm just going to quote Cartier-Bresson's exact words when he was describing the decisive moment, because I think it relates to this video workshop. So he said, "Photography is the simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of the significance of an event, as well as of a precise organisation of forms which give that event its proper expression." So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this photograph of his and we're just going to break it down into shapes and just have a look at how well composed the image is. We have this image of a man jumping over a puddle. And the first thing I've done is I have isolated the triangles. So we're going to go through this by looking at all the different shapes. So we've got the green triangles up in the roof there. Then let's look at this figure of the dancer. So you can see it here, I've highlighted it in yellow, in the poster right at the back of the image. And then we can see it reflected, obviously, in the water. And then we have the actual shape of the man. So we have these three kind of V-shaped human figures at crucial points within the image. And then we have these block rectangles, one here, and that's a reflection of the fence, and one in the fence itself. Then we have these ellipses or circles that we see created by both the shapes of the objects on the ground, but also in the reflected ripples as well. So when we look at the image all together, we can see that not only is this moment capturing a movement, it's capturing this fraction of a second where the guy is jumping in midair, but it's also composed of all these geometric shapes together. And when we look at the image, when any normal person looks at the image, they might just see a pleasing composition. Everything kind of feels right when we look at this image. But it's our job as photographers, people that study photography, to look a little bit deeper and think, well, how exactly is this picture composed and why does it seem so perfect? And part of the reason is this combination of geometric shapes placed at really important points in the photographic plane. So some in the background, some in the midground, and some in the foreground. Okay, so here is your task for the shape section of this workshop. And it is to look through a window, at a window, or at the reflections in the window. Pay attention to the shapes you can see, and then make a photograph. And to help inspire you, here is a photograph by actually she was an unknown photographer, Vivian Maier. She only became known as a great photographer after her death. But anyway, she took a lot of self-portraits using reflections in windows, and here's a great example here. And you can see so many shapes, so many interesting viewpoints, and great colours as well. Okay, good luck. Okay, for the last section of the workshop, we are going to look at texture. Again, looking at two photographers. So the first one is Andreas Gursky. Andreas Gursky is a German photographer, and he is well known for his large format architectural and landscape colour photographs. And if you're ever lucky enough to see them in the flesh, they are really huge, so that you almost feel like you're standing within them. And you can see here he photographs different architectural styles, but I think also his work is really interested in systems, so the patterns, shapes and textures that humans inflict on the world around us. And I think it's just really useful when you're out for your daily exercise or even from within your own home. Look at the way structures are composed. So whether that is a shelving unit or a block of flats or a solar panel, whatever, and really try and isolate the patterns and the textures that you're looking at. The other artist we're going to look at is Edward Weston, who was an American photographer, and he was one of the kind of forefathers of modern photography. Really, really famous 20th century photographer. And he has lots and lots and lots of work in his back catalogue, but I just want us to look at these still lifes, which are real favourites of mine. And although they look like they are very difficult to achieve, they're fairly simplistic in their setup. So they are fruits and vegetables, and they're put onto a nice neutral background. And then he would often use available light, so sunlight. And when you're doing this kind of work, still life work, well, first of all, it's great for us just now because anybody can do that from within their own home. And I would advise the first thing for you to do is to make a selection of some objects from around your house and then spend some time actually looking at them, touching them, familiarise yourself with the various textures of that object. And only then, when you're familiar, take your camera and start to make your images. And just to show you how easy it is, I'm doing a very, very quick setup for you. So there's just a black piece of paper, a bit of pepper, and a table lamp. Okay, so the reason I ripped the pepper in half was to show up some of the nice textures inside. And I'm just going to use an iPhone. My iPhone is slow, so hopefully your one's a bit better. And you'll see when you tap on the subject, a little sunshine icon will come up, and you can drag that up and down to change the brightness. And now I'm just going to do some very basic editing using the inbuilt app on the phone. There's lots of apps, as I'm sure you know, you can download as well. So all I'm going to do is change it into black and white by taking the saturation down, and then I am going to play around with contrast. Well, you've got all these different filters you can use here, which are basically presets, but you can also go in individually and change things as you want to. So the other thing I like to do is to crop the image, and then you can rotate it, and you can make it square or keep it rectangular, whichever you like. And then I like to do my editing actually my final editing in Instagram itself. So I go in and I just press on edit instead of choosing a filter. And then again, I'm just going to change my brightness. I want it quite dark so it can show up all the nice textures. And I'll increase the contrast again so you can really show up the texture of the pepper. And I don't really need to do much else, except I'm going to just check my highlights, maybe bring them up a little bit. That's fine. And there we go. Really easy. and that's my final picture. So yeah, I hope you can see that this can be, you don't need any fancy equipment. You can just use whatever you have got to hand. So I hope you enjoyed that video and you got something from it. We'd love to see the photographs you've produced, so please feel free to post them at Stills School Instagram. Thank you so much. Bye bye.